It helps if you get other people to help you through your writing process. If you can have two, maybe even one good friend that you can run it by, and then they can help you to find the right wording, because the way I explained it was not reaching Mark. But now having him support me in writing this part, now we've got it written in a way that he can understand. So I know mine's like him can get it, and mine's like me. I've got more of a right hemisphere brain. Mark has more of the left hemisphere brain. So I think the way we've done it now, it's helped to make it understandable for either right or left brain people.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Mark Siedler and Lynetta Avery, co-authors of Why This Keeps Happening, a 4-book series that does something that most resources might not. It meets you in the actual moment of activation and gives you something that you can use right then. Not next week in therapy, not after you've processed it, but right then. These are survivors who spent decades doing the work, therapy, workshops, spiritual practices, found themselves stuck. And so they discovered how trauma really lives in the body, shapes the mind, moves through emotions, and shows up in relationships. And that's what we're unpacking today. That and the writing tips behind creating such a resource for everybody. So without further ado, Mark and Lynetta, it's a pleasure to welcome you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Danielle.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around, because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. I'm excited for this conversation. I think a lot of people need to hear it, and I think what you're doing is so important. But before we talk about the books, let's talk about the two of you. I mean, you spent decades in therapy and workshops and resources. Walk us through what that journey looks like and what kept you searching.
I'd say unhappiness
Oh,
or
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
dissatisfaction with our lives.
Yeah.
We both had difficult childhoods, and we adapted, which is what our works are all about, in all 4 of these domains. Our bodies had certain things that happened, our minds, our emotions, our relationships followed certain patterns. And we've been on a lifelong journey to figure out, well, what's the best way to be a human being on this planet, especially in all 4 of these domains.
Mhm.
And we did a whole bunch of living and learning before we met. We met 12 years ago and discovered we had been on amazingly parallel paths to each other, that we had both done like 6 major trainings before we had met. So when we connected, and we connected pretty quickly, then we found that we had an amazing toolbox in relationship,
Yeah.
in supporting ourselves, supporting each other, like things that had gone on in past relationships, like finger pointing, blaming your partner for what you don't like about your life. Like none of that stuff ever went on because we had tools that knew, like, no, this is always something internal in you that's coming out in your relationship or the other domains as well.
Understood. Right, right. Well, tell us about that then, because you create these domains, right? Mind, heart, body, relationships, like you just mentioned. But why separate it into these categories rather
Oh,
than one
Right.
experience as a whole?
great question. Um, well, if you go research what's out there, there's a lot of authors who address just one of the domains. For example, there's a book that's extremely well known called The Body Keeps the Score, about how things from the past, which some people would call trauma, affect the body. And it only focuses on the body. Also, we both had tried to read it previously, and a lot of our friends with similar backgrounds, and everybody gave up after a while. And we discovered recently the reason is it wasn't written for people like us, people who were, let's call them survivors of trauma. It was actually written for other therapists and clinicians. So it just bogs you down for a typical reader like us to try to use it.
Yeah, a lot of psychology terms and clinical terms.
Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't very helpful, and it was only focused on the body. And then there's some great authors that focus on limiting beliefs and the mind, and some focus on emotions, and some focus on relationships. But almost all of these authors, they only focus on one or maybe two of these domains. But as Lynette and I have been together for the past 12 years, and we've gone through trainings and life experience that we just came to see more and more our patterns through all four of these domains.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized, you know what? Nobody has addressed patterns, trauma, whatever you want to call it, things from the past that are still influencing our present life across all four domains. And Lynn and I looked at each other and said, you know what? We need to write those books because it does not exist. Anything that's that systematic, that thorough. And it is kind of artificial because we're going to have four separate books as well as a combined volume. And people could start anywhere they want. If they have lots of, let's call them racing thoughts or limiting beliefs they're aware of, things like I'm not good enough, this isn't going to work, people don't like me, the world is dangerous. They could start with the belief book, book number 2. If they're having relationship challenges and constant fighting and defensiveness with people, then they could start with book 4. But to really do it justice, we realized we needed to kind of artificially separate them just for the purpose of study and usage. And we designed the books two different ways. One is somebody who's kind of on that self-study, self-development path might want to pick up a book and say, I've always got things going on in my mind. Let me study book number 2, cover to cover if it works, and see what I can get out of it. So all 4 books can be read from beginning to end. So for example, the body book deals with literally different regions of the body. It starts with the head. These things might go on in your head, like tension, headaches, pains, if you had something happen in the past that your body had to react to. And we literally divide the body into regions from head to toe. And we do the same thing with each of the 4 domains, so that the second way to use the book is if somebody has an issue that needs immediate attention, and we kind of say it's designed to be that companion at 3 in the morning. You wake up in the middle of the night and you're feeling some, huge emotions like fear in your heart, or thoughts racing through your head, or you're upset about your partner lying in bed next to you. You can literally jump to that chapter in that book, and there's an immediate addressing of what's going on, a way to take down the tension, pain, whatever it is. And then there's a 30-day suggested program, because we acknowledge this may have helped right now in the moment, but this has been likely a lifelong pattern. And it's going to take steady practice with some suggested techniques to address the pattern itself and make a more permanent change in your life, instead of just it's just like the opposite of taking an aspirin for a headache and then the next night you have a headache again. What good have you really done? So we want to address the problems at a long-term level. And it's the second way to use the books.
Mhm. And
Understood.
and we have a template that we're using that's no medical terms, no psychology terms, no spiritual terms, just everyday language.
Speaking just like we would speak to you or to a friend of ours.
Yeah.
We address the reader directly as you. You may be experiencing this. And it's all way simple, way just directly addressed.
Yeah.
Right. I like that. And I guess it's kind of, well, first off, the idea that you created this book because there was a need out there, right? You realize yourselves what's out there is not helping
as effective as it could. It's not reaching as many people. So you design this basically to reach everybody. And I also like what you said about it being like very self-directed. It sounds like readers take control of their place in the book. They choose what parts they should be reading. So tell us about that. Like, why is autonomy like that so important in trauma work and in this type of resource that they have the choice?
Oh,
What do you think?
well, one word that I was using at first, but I changed it. But a favorite word of mine is sovereignty. but
Mm.
but I had to simplify that term, and now I think that it's our book is saying authorship, like you are the author of your own story, and I don't know that that is the word, but it's like you are the authority, and even when it comes to which part of the book you're going to start reading, as well as if while you're doing the exercises, it's getting too intense or something, you can stop and to constantly, we're directing them to tune in and see, well, how are you feeling right now? Do you want to continue now? Like there's a lot of asking permission before jumping in. And that's part of the issue is this pattern of what we were calling trauma in the first title of the book, um, is because their will was thwarted. So they were being forced, as we are as children. You're being forced to do things that you really don't want to do, but you have to submit. Otherwise, your life is going to be very, very hard on you. So you learn to adapt and you learn to give up your will, your free will. You don't fight it anymore. You learn how to suppress that and get along. Unless you're really stubborn and maybe you do fight a lot, fight your parents a lot, but you're probably going to get in a lot of trouble. And like me, I found out if I just said yes to whatever they were saying, and then when they're gone, I do whatever I want. That was my way. And I called it being sneaky.
But later in her life, she did the exact opposite, and she became the ultimate badass rebel.
Yes.
So she's lived both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. At
right.
first, it's gone between people pleasing, but then I get real resentful and then I would start full out rebellion.
Of course. Yeah, no, I get that. But so that's good that you kind of directed the books in a way that helps people who are in kind of in your shoes then, right? Like you have that agency to do what is best for you and it gives them kind of the first step into recovery just by doing that simple action of choosing where in the book to start, right? So that's
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that.
It's also the books that we wish we had.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
we're both in our 60s now.
Mhm.
So we've got a lifetime of experience behind us, a lifetime of learning and study and workshops and therapy,
Mhm.
and a lifetime of experimenting, if you will. Like, for me, this is my second marriage. For Lynetta, this is her fourth marriage. So we practice on a lot of people learning how to do relationships, what works and what doesn't work. So what we're looking to do is maybe cut decades off the learning process a lot of us go through when we've got stuff in our background so that people can have an empowered life, a life full of love and joy and choosing what they want and not having what they don't want now instead of decades in the future like it's taken us to get to.
Right.
That's the biggest reason we wrote it. We wish we had these.
Mhm.
Understood. Yeah, and I think that's where the best writing comes from. It's like I mentioned before, something a need was out there, you filled it. It's something that you wish you had. So let's
Mhm.
transition into that writing process a little bit too, because there's so many authors
Mhm.
out there who may be writing about a similar topic, or even just like something that's challenging for them to comprehend or think about. And you guys have done it yourself. So, what was it like translating your lived experience into a written framework? How did you balance the personal with the practical? Tell us about that. What
I
kind of
think,
Well,
do you have something you want to share?
well, in my own process, I had been trying to teach Mark how to do this, but when I had a cyst on the side of my breast, I was starting right by writing the body portion of the book because I've mastered more of the body stuff. and Mark is more master of the other 3 domains. So, but in my trying to help him with his body pain, which he has a lot of jaw tightness, still works on that. I would talk to him about going into what I did for my own breast cyst was dive right into where the pain is, sit with it, and just say, I'm not here to fix you, change you, or make you go away. I'm just here to listen. And I wasn't successful in helping him guide into that. It wasn't really working for him. But now through writing the book, it's gone into such depth and detail. And Mark has helped in writing that part. So now it's got more of the rich detail that I didn't have before to help people to know how. And it helps if you get other people to help you through your writing process. If you can have just even 2, maybe even 1 good friend that you can run it by, and then they can help you to find the right wording, because the way you explain it, the way I explained it was not reaching Mark. But now having him support me in writing this part, now we've got it written in a way that he can understand, so I know minds like him can get it and minds like me. I've got more of a right hemisphere brain. Mark has more of the left hemisphere brain. So I think the way we've done it now, because we have that, it's helped to make it understandable for either right or left brain people.
Yeah. Also,
Understood. Okay.
I'm gonna back up. We both have previous books,
Okay.
and Lynetta has been trying to write her life story for like 20 years or
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
She's journaled like forever, and she kept writing and writing and writing, and then she'd look at it and say, "Oh, this is useless," and she'd
Yeah.
discard it all.
Yeah.
She'd get frustrated. She didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But as I heard her stories about her life. And man, she has some interesting stories.
Yeah.
um, I realized it came to me a way that this could be presented where she could share her story, but also share. Well, we organized it to share her story briefly when something difficult happened, and then what she did with it, like how it affected her life all the
Yeah.
way to date.
All through adulthood.
And then to share a tool she used to transform it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then to share how her life is now, as of the time of the writing, after she had transformed it. So it's kind of like our interaction together, and it's what Lynetta suggested, like interact with somebody.
Mhm.
And that might help you get a better feel for how to get what you have to express into a form that will work for other people, that other people are going to say, oh, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
And of course, nowadays it involves not just other people, but AI can be an extremely useful tool. We've been relying on it heavily in creating these works because, for example, for book 2 about limiting beliefs, things that run in our head that come from our past, I had some immediately, I've had some that I've identified my entire life. It's like, oh yeah, I know limiting beliefs, and I've taken workshops on dealing with them and clearing them. And I came up with a whole list of limiting beliefs. It's like, oh yeah, there's this one, this one, this one, this one. So then I went to AI and I said, okay, am I missing anything here? Is there anything I'm leaving out? And AI said 2 great things. Well, one is, yeah, you left out this, this, and this. Like, these are also important limiting. I literally told it, search all the literature out there. And, what kind of limiting beliefs do people deal with? So I found I was missing some. I hadn't had all of them out there. But then I got an even bigger insight. I realized, the path that I took as a kid and Lynetta took as a kid in response to what happened in our homes. When there's something that like shocks us, and we're younger and we don't have tools like we have as adults, there's a part of us that says, oh my God, that was horrible. What do I do So maybe I can not have that happen again, or have it less frequently, or whatever, and our body does that, our mind does that, our emotions do, like everything inside of us does that. And I assumed that most people, or all people, would say, oh, there must be something wrong with me that this is happening. And therefore you go to, well, what can I do? Can I make myself better? Can I make myself, more compliant?
Be good enough.
Good enough. Yeah. People please. Like, what can I do? So hopefully, can I read the room better? So I can see if somebody's about to explode emotionally and I can go run away, whatever. And the ways that I adapted, I just assumed everybody chose this path. There must be something about me that I can do that will maybe make me a little safer. But then again, interacting with AI, it said, yeah, I actually asked numbers, about 3/4 of people do exactly what you did, exactly what Lynetta did. But then it also said, but there's about 1/4 of people who don't do that. And we had spoken to some friends of ours who also had trauma in their background, and their childhood was quite different. Like one friend who had a dad who, I won't get into any of the details, but she said as an infant, she would punch back at her dad when he would hit her. And I'm like, what kind of infant does that? you know and then there was somebody we were talking to that said, yeah, when he was like 8 years old or 11 years old, and his mom had a lot of psychological problems, pretty severe, and she would say verbal things against him and whatever. He said, I always just knew it wasn't me, it was them. And when Lynette and I heard that, we were like, well, how did you get that? We always assumed it was us. And some of these friends or acquaintances of ours said, no, I always got it wasn't me, it was them. So I found out, and AI kind of led me down this path, and awareness of our friends, like, oh, we're missing some of the people. They don't choose the path we chose. They choose either in opposition or maybe in conjunction, a path that says, no, I'm not the problem. They are. There's something wrong with them. And then they react somewhat differently. So doing that research has been extremely helpful in our creating this whole work, both talking to people and nowadays using AI.
Understood. Yeah, thanks for walking us through that process. And it sounds like AI was a huge tool for both of you during the process of creating that. So, for the authors listening today, can you speak a little bit about, how, I mean, you mentioned a couple instances of using AI as a tool, but how do you know the difference between when we're using it as a tool and when we're using it too much? I feel like that's a big question these days in the writing world.
Right.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
we're in a bunch of AI courses.
For one thing, we have to
Yeah.
constantly write it and say, no, that's not the right word. This wording, we're getting it so it speaks exactly like us. So there's revisions and revisions and revisions, and, just like authors go through when they're normally writing. But we're catching it at any time it's going off of the way we speak, or the template basically that we've created. So every single word is us,
Right.
our wording.
Yeah, and that's been a huge challenge. There are courses we've taken where they teach you as an author to use AI to like write a whole book for you, for example. you know and some of our AI teachers had said they have concerns that AI makes you stupid.
Yeah.
And Lynn and I listened to that
Oh
and
my
we're like,
gosh.
oh my God, we have to look at every line that gets produced, as Lynetta said,
Mhm.
because it'll start to drift in tone or start to get technical or scientific. And we're like, no, we're speaking directly to the person. Don't use third person, use second person. Like some things, like we're doing a quick start to this whole series and using AI. I'm on, I think, version 34 right now.
Yeah.
And that's using AI. It's like, line by line, I have to just go through it. And it's like, yep, that's good. No, we don't want to say it this way. So it's almost like a co-writing process. For
Mhm.
some people, they might be able to rely on it more heavily, but we're so focused on doing things exactly the way that we think is going to help the most people. We don't want to trigger people, but we don't want to be blah either. We want something to be effective and concise and easy to consume.
Yeah.
So it's
Understood.
been
And
a
that's
very delicate path that we're weaving.
Yeah.
right, right. And kind of going into that, concise and easy to consume. As an author, as authors, talk to us a little bit about that, about using that plain language, avoiding the clinical terminology. Was that a challenge on your end to kind of break everything down into, plain words rather than the
Um,
more fancy words?
A little bit, like even, we spoke to you, briefly right before we got on
Yeah.
that we've even rebranded this. Originally, we've gone through several names. The most recent one before today was the Trauma Bible, because, trauma is something that, those of us who've been in this self-development world for maybe decades are quite familiar with trauma. They might call themselves a survivor, even though we don't really use that word about ourselves. But, we've kind of been in it for decades. And there's a common language that's used, and that's where trauma came from. And Bible was just such a powerful word that it was kind of like, God, there's no way anybody's going to ignore something called the Trauma Bible. It's like you might not like it, but you can't ignore it.
Right.
But then we got, but we're a little too much in it, because one of our business coaches said, do you know, you might be able to bring this into corporate world. And we've mostly focused on the consumer world, on the individual, supporting friends, supporting clients. Haven't really focused on the corporate world at all. And she said, you could go into companies like Google and offer resources, just exactly what you're doing, to people in companies. And we realized, if we're going to have that broader appeal, words like trauma and Bible aren't going to work. So we had to get rid of some of our, previous, we're in the system and this is the terminology of the system. Even though we're not therapists or clinicians, it's like, we've got to make it more accessible.
Yeah.
So certain people don't say, oh, no, that's not for me.
Mhm.
Right. Understood. Yeah, and that's why how you widen your audience and you make it so that anybody, wherever they're at, whatever stage they're in, can approach it. Kind of going back to how you said before, but people can jump right in and have their own agency about where to pick up. Well, it makes them
Hmm.
feel like they have their own agency to connect with this book too. So I like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a really insightful conversation. I love what you're doing here. It's you're taking something that feels overwhelming and impossible, but you made it accessible and help people really connect it, but also by honoring the complexity of what people are experiencing. So it's been definitely inspiring to hear. And I think the audience, as authors, have also learned a lot, about taking big concepts and breaking it down. So it's been a pleasure. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about this?
So currently, I guess they could look us up on Facebook,
Yeah.
either Mark Siedler, Siedler, or Lynetta Ann
Avery.
Avery.
Lynetta Ann Avery.
Lynetta Ann Avery,
Yeah.
Avery. That's
Yeah.
one place they can find us.
Yeah.
Right now, we still have the Trauma Bible branding up, and they can go to intro.thetraumabible, and they can pick up a intro to this series, though we're going to be revising it with the Why This Keeps Happening name. But the old one will still keep up, so they can get info there. And as soon as the books are released, they'll be notified by email so they can get copies of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, awesome. I love that. We're going to put the links in the
Mhm.
description box of this podcast today, everybody. So you can certainly go ahead and click on over and get in the know and look for those and sign up for it too. So you could be on the list.
Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
coming on.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for having
Danielle.
us.
We really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're listening today and this episode helped you see your own reactions differently, just go ahead and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. I think that's been the best we can do. And just get connected with Mark and Lynetta. And in the meantime, just keep writing, keep inspiring, and keep leading others. I will see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.